Your diabetic mother is gasping in 97-degree heat because the HOA president literally stole your air conditioner. Not relocated it, stole it, while you were at work. Then this woman, this absolute sociopath, calls 911 sobbing that you committed theft while standing in her backyard, next to your stolen AC unit, running full blast to cool her house. The kicker? Your security camera caught everything, every lie she told the cops, every fake tear, every moment of her directing two guys to rip your unit off its concrete pad like some kind of air conditioning car jack. You can actually taste the metallic rage when you see those fresh bolt shavings scattered across your empty concrete slab. Evidence of theft happening in broad daylight. What would you do if someone endangered your family's health, stole your property, then tried to have you arrested for their own crime? Drop where you're watching from and tell me the most insane thing your HOA has ever pulled. My name's Marcus Blackwood, and 6 months ago I thought the biggest threat to my family was my mother's diabetes. Turns out I was wrong. The biggest threat was a 52-year-old real estate agent with a God complex and a white BMW. Let me back up. When Grandma passed last year, she left me her 1960s ranch house in Meadowbrook Estates, the kind of place where neighbors still wave and kids ride bikes without helmets. The house came with everything that mattered: her rose garden that still perfumes the air with sweet jasmine every morning, the workshop where she taught me that anything with moving parts can be fixed, and enough memories to fill a library. It also came with my mother, Rita. She's 68, diabetic, and tougher than a $2 steak, but heat tries to kill her. Type 2 diabetes doesn't negotiate. Last summer proved that with 2 ER visits when our ancient window units couldn't keep up. Nothing says medical emergency like watching your mother's blood sugar spike because she's overheating in her own living room. So I did what any son would do, worked overtime for 6 months, lived on ramen and stubbornness, and saved $4,200 for a professional-grade 3-ton central air unit. The kind that purrs instead of rattles, cools instead of just moving hot air around. I installed it myself on the concrete pad Grandma had poured in 1987. She always planned ahead, probably knew someday her grandson would need to keep his diabetic mother alive. The rough concrete felt warm under my hands as I bolted down the unit, and for the first time in years, that house felt like a sanctuary instead of a sauna. Then I met Delilah Cromwell. Picture every Karen meme you've ever seen, add a real estate license and 6 years of unchecked power, then remove any trace of human decency. Delilah speaks in that passive-aggressive tone where every sentence sounds like a question, as if you're too stupid to understand she's about to ruin your day. 3 days after installation, exactly long enough for me to think I'd solved my problems, a violation notice appeared in my mailbox like a cancer diagnosis. The crisp snap of opening that envelope should have been my first warning. Exterior equipment placement requires pre-approval per CCNR Section 14.7b. Fine, $150, escalating $50 daily until compliance achieved. Here's the beautiful irony. I found Grandma's original 1987 architectural approval in her filing cabinet, specifically designating that exact spot for future cooling equipment. Delilah's response? Old approvals don't transfer to new ownership. Apparently, property rights have expiration dates in her twisted world. I filed a formal appeal with photos, receipts, and my professional HVAC certification, the kind of documentation that should have ended this nonsense immediately. Her reply arrived faster than a pizza delivery. Appeals process requires $500 administrative fee, non-refundable, cash only. Cash only. Because nothing says legitimate governance like demanding untraceable payments. That evening, walking past her house, I heard the truth. Her pool pump rumbling like a freight train 24/7, but somehow my whisper-quiet AC unit violated noise ordinances. The diesel exhaust smell from her idling BMW during neighborhood inspections became as familiar as the scent of Grandma's roses. Within a week, 3 neighbors approached me with identical stories. Mrs. Chen's garden gnomes, suddenly unapproved decorative elements. The Rodriguez family's swing set, now a recreational equipment placement violation. Tom Bradley's museum-quality 1969 Camaro transformed overnight into non-conforming vehicle storage. Every violation targeted families who'd crossed Delilah before. The pattern was clear as fresh bolt marks in concrete. George Pettigrew, my neighbor and retired surveyor, confirmed my suspicions while we watched Delilah measure my property line with suspicious precision. "Son, that woman's been asking hypothetical questions about your corner lot for months. Development potential, property values, the works. The pieces clicked together with the satisfying precision of a well-tuned compressor. This wasn't about building codes or neighborhood aesthetics. This was a real estate scam disguised as civic duty. But Delilah made one crucial mistake. She assumed Marcus Blackwood would roll over like every other victim. She didn't know that in Grandma's workshop, I learned more than just HVAC repair. I learned that bullies count on your silence, documentation beats intimidation, and sometimes the most important battles happen in your own backyard. The war was just beginning, and I had home field advantage. The next morning, Delilah showed up for her compliance inspection like a general surveying conquered territory. She brought 2 HOA board members who looked like they'd rather be getting root canals, plus a clipboard thick enough to stop bullets. They measured distances with theatrical precision that would have impressed Broadway. Every measurement got photographed from 3 angles, every notation accompanied by exaggerated head shaking and whispered conferences. The metallic click of her tape measure became the soundtrack to my growing rage, punctuated by the diesel exhaust smell from her idling BMW. According to our records, Delilah announced with nuclear-grade smugness, this unit sits 2.3 inches too close to the property line, violating municipal setback requirements. 72 hours to relocate or remove. Now here's something my old HVAC instructor taught me. When someone's measurements don't make sense, check their math and their motives. That evening, I spent 3 hours in the county records office, a place that smells like old coffee and bureaucratic despair, digging through property maps. What I found was pure gold. The property line Delilah referenced had been moved in 2019 when the city widened our street. Our HOA was still using 2015 maps. My unit wasn't too close to anything. It was 8 feet from the actual boundary. Something I'd learned the hard way on previous jobs. Property surveys older than 5 years can be worthless after municipal improvements, and one call to the county assessor saves you thousands in fake compliance costs. George Pettigrew emerged from his garage the next morning carrying surveying equipment that looked older than disco, but twice as reliable. The crisp morning air carried Mrs. Chen's jasmine tea scent as neighbors gathered to watch George work his magic. His transit clicked and whirred with mechanical precision. "Marcus is right," he announced, loud enough for every security camera in the subdivision. 8 feet, 2 inches from the actual property line. HOAs working from outdated maps. That's when the beautiful thing happened. Other neighbors started approaching with their own violation notices. Mrs. Chen's garden gnomes were supposedly 6 inches into a neighbor's yard, except that neighbor confirmed they'd been there 5 years without complaints. The Rodriguez swing set violated a setback requirement that didn't exist on current maps. Tom's pristine Camaro was improperly parked, based on property lines redrawn 3 years ago. Every violation used the same outdated maps. Every measurement was deliberately wrong. When I presented the survey evidence to Delilah that afternoon, she pivoted faster than a guilty politician. Setback issues aside, this unit creates noise violations. The constant humming disturbs my peace at night. I actually laughed, couldn't help it. "Delilah, your bedroom is 150 feet away, and your pool pump sounds like a diesel generator having an asthma attack. My unit runs whisper quiet at 58 decibels. Your pump hits 75. That's completely different." "Different how?" "My equipment serves community purposes. Your pool is private." "Well, the community is welcome to enjoy it." "Right, and I'm welcome to enjoy her BMW if I can figure out where she hides the keys." But here's where the real pattern emerged. During George's survey work, neighbors started sharing stories over the rough wooden fence that separates our properties. Mrs. Chen's violation appeared exactly 2 days after she'd questioned Delilah's landscaping expenses at the monthly meeting. The Rodriguezes got cited right after their teenage daughter Sophia posted a TikTok about HOA Karen's ruining America. Tom's classic Camaro became a problem 1 week after he'd asked why board meetings weren't being recorded. Every violation followed the same timeline. Cross Delilah, get targeted. The afternoon heat made the asphalt shimmer as Delilah conducted her neighborhood wellness checks, driving slowly past targeted houses while photographing through her passenger window. The scratchy feel of old documents in Grandma's filing cabinet that evening revealed something even more damning. George's surveyor contacts had been busy making calls. 3 other subdivisions where Delilah's consulting company provided services reported identical problems. Outdated maps, selective enforcement, mysterious violations targeting homeowners who'd crossed her. This wasn't bureaucratic incompetence. This was systematic harassment with a business model. "Son," George said, rolling up his survey maps with satisfaction, "that woman's been asking very specific questions about your corner lot, development potential, property values, recent sales data. Awful detailed interest for someone who claims this is about building codes." The pieces clicked together like a perfectly balanced HVAC system. Manufacture fake violations, pressure homeowners into distressed sales, handle the transactions through her real estate business, profit from both the problem and the solution. Time to document everything. Photos, recordings, witness statements, violation notices from across the neighborhood. If Delilah wanted to play property law games, I'd show her what happened when you picked on someone who actually read the fine print. The war was escalating, but I had ammunition she didn't expect. Truth, angry neighbors, and a growing evidence file that would make any prosecutor smile. Let's see how deep she'd dig her own grave. 2 days later, Delilah dropped her nuclear bomb, a formal complaint with county code enforcement claiming I'd installed equipment without permits. This wasn't neighborhood drama anymore. This was government paperwork that could result in fines, forced removal, and a permanent scarlet letter on my property records. County investigator Jerry Kowalski showed up looking like he'd rather be fishing. 20-year veteran who'd seen every homeowner dispute since the Clinton administration. Problem was, he didn't know our subdivision's Byzantine history, and Delilah had buried him under an avalanche of evidence. Her documentation looked professional enough to fool a Supreme Court justice. Photocopied surveys, highlighted building codes, even sworn statements from longtime residents claiming my concrete pad was originally meant for decorative planters. Complete bullshit, but beautifully formatted bullshit. That's when I remembered Earl Hutchinson, Grandma's original contractor, now 78 but still sharp enough to build cabinets that would outlast cockroaches. I found Earl in his workshop, a sacred space that smelled like WD-40 and honest work, surrounded by hand tools that probably belonged in the Smithsonian. "Course I remember that job," he chuckled, pulling out a filing cabinet older than MTV. "Your grandma specifically wanted that pad ready for future cooling equipment. Said her grandson was smart enough to need it someday." Earl's photos were pure gold. Black and white installation shots with timestamps, permit numbers, and notes in handwriting so precise it could have been typed. My old trade school instructor used to say that original photos with timestamps beat any disputed paperwork. Municipalities lose documents, but cameras don't lie, especially when they're cross-referenced with official permit stamps. But Earl had an even bigger surprise. 40 years of construction work creates a gossip network that would make the CIA jealous, and some of his contacts had worked on Delilah's house. Her property was hiding 3 major violations: a $15,000 unpermitted deck addition, an illegal basement apartment rented to college students, and a septic system uninspected since Obama's first term. "Funny thing about finger pointers," Earl said, organizing photos with surgical precision. "They usually got the dirtiest hands." My Meadowbrook Truth Facebook group exploded overnight, 23 neighbors joining with violation stories that made mine look like a love letter. The pattern was clearer than fresh motor oil. Delilah weaponized HOA rules against anyone who questioned her authority. Then she crossed the line into pure evil. A citation appeared taped directly to Rita's bedroom window, not delivered to the door like civilized people, but positioned where my diabetic mother would see it first thing in the morning. Public nuisance violation. Unauthorized garden attracting stinging insects that pose health risks to community members with allergies. She was targeting Grandma's roses, 30-year-old roses that had never hurt anyone, claiming they attracted killer bees or some nonsense. The sharp buzz of Rita's blood sugar monitor that afternoon told me everything about the stress this harassment was causing. Here's something I'd learned from Rita's previous ER visits that insurance companies don't advertise. Medical necessity equipment enjoys federal protection under disability rights laws. Interfering with prescribed medical devices isn't just cruel, it's a felony carrying serious prison time. Dr. Patricia Valdez provided a letter stating that removing our cooling system would constitute criminal medical endangerment. The crisp sound of our printer working overtime filled the house as we documented everything. Our fence line meetings became neighborhood strategy sessions. Mrs. Chen brought cookies that could have ended international conflicts. Tom Bradley offered technical assistance with a grin that suggested his military police background included creative problem solving. Sophia Rodriguez, our teenage legal research prodigy, uncovered state laws protecting diabetic patients' cooling equipment. Violations carried $10,000 fines per incident. But Sophia's real genius was social media investigation. She found Delilah's LinkedIn profile listing her as property acquisition specialist for 3 real estate investment companies. Her job description? Identifying undervalued properties through strategic community management. Strategic community management, fancy words for terrorizing families into selling their homes below market value. That night brought the smoking gun. Someone stalking my property, taking photos, peering through windows. My security cameras captured everything, license plates, faces, even whispered phone conversations about pressure points and compliance acceleration. The musty smell of accumulated evidence filled my kitchen as we organized our war chest. Photos, recordings, witness statements, medical documentation, proof of real estate fraud, and now criminal stalking evidence. But here's the beautiful twist. Every escalation created more witnesses, more evidence, and more serious charges. Delilah wasn't just digging her own grave, she was excavating her own burial ground. Time to see how deep she'd go before hitting bedrock. Then came the day that shattered everything. I dragged myself home after a brutal 12-hour shift fixing broken AC units across town. The irony would have been funny if I wasn't about to discover my own personal hell. The first thing that hit me was the silence. Not peaceful evening quiet, but the wrong kind of silence. The absence of that familiar electrical hum that meant my family was safe and cool. My AC unit was gone, vanished. Just loose wires dangling like severed arteries, disturbed gravel showing drag marks, and 4 concrete anchor bolts standing naked as evidence of theft. The metallic taste of pure fury flooded my mouth as I stared at the crime scene that used to be my peace of mind. But here's the beautiful thing about paranoia disguised as prudence. My security cameras had captured Academy Award-worthy footage. The video was prosecution-grade perfection. Delilah at 11:47 a.m. directing 2 men with a pickup truck, pointing to my unit while declaring, "That's the incorrectly installed equipment. Relocate it to proper storage until the owner follows proper procedures." Crystal clear audio, HD video, and her face lit up like a Christmas morning criminal. Proper storage. Right. And I'm the Pope's personal HVAC technician. I walked the neighborhood to prevent myself from committing justifiable homicide, and that's when I heard the smoking gun. My own AC unit's distinctive electrical signature, coming from Delilah's backyard. My stolen property, professionally connected to her house, cooling her entitled existence, while her old unit sat discarded like yesterday's lies. The acrid smell of fresh electrical work hung around her property like guilt made tangible. When I knocked on her door with my phone recording, she answered with the swagger of someone who thought checkmate was impossible. "Marcus, what can I do for you this lovely evening? You can explain why my air conditioning unit is serenading your house." "I have absolutely no idea what you're talking about." "Delilah, I can literally hear my compressor running behind your fence." Her face performed a masterclass in criminal realization. Confusion melting into awareness, then crystallizing into pure panic. That equipment was dangerously installed and posed neighborhood safety risks. I had it properly secured until appropriate compliance procedures. You had it connected to your electrical system. That's temporary storage requires proper... Look, you'll receive it back when you demonstrate proper procedural compliance. The storm door slammed with enough force to register on seismic equipment. 23 minutes later, I timed it, police sirens announced Delilah's counteroffensive. She'd called 911 claiming I'd violently stolen her air conditioning unit and was threatening physical harm. Her performance in the driveway would have earned an Oscar for Best Actress in a fictional victim role. "Officers, thank the Lord you're here. This man broke into my property and stole my cooling equipment. I'm absolutely terrified. He's been systematically harassing me for weeks." Officer Janet Morrison stepped out looking like she'd seen every scam since disco died. 15 years of separating truth from bullshit had given her a lie detector where most people keep their patience. "Sir, do you have documentation of ownership?" I showed her the security footage, the timestamp proving theft during my work hours. Audio contradicting every syllable of Delilah's fabricated victimhood. Purchase receipts with serial numbers matching the unit currently humming her house to Arctic perfection. Officer Morrison's expression shifted from professional neutrality to controlled volcanic anger as she watched Delilah orchestrate grand theft auto conditioning. "Ma'am, this footage clearly shows you directing the removal of his property. Please explain." That's when Delilah's carefully constructed facade imploded like a meth lab. "That video is computer-generated fake news. He digitally manipulated everything. These people don't belong in a quality neighborhood anyway. They need to understand their proper place. I've been protecting legitimate property values from their harassment of decent families." The racist venom hung in the evening air like toxic fog. Officer Morrison's pen moved across her notepad faster than a court stenographer, preserving every incriminating word for federal prosecutors. Mrs. Chen, George, and the Rodriguez family materialized from their houses, attracted by the spectacle of justice finally arriving. They confirmed timelines and offered additional security footage from multiple angles. The evidence mountain grew taller than Delilah's lies. But the cruelest twist wasn't the theft, it was the medical emergency it triggered. Rita's blood sugar spiked from stress and sudden heat exposure. Her glucose monitor's sharp electronic alarm escalated to frantic beeping as I dialed 911 for paramedics. While Officer Morrison documented the crime scene, my mother was getting strapped into an ambulance because someone had stolen life-sustaining medical equipment. The crisp sound of handcuffs clicking shut provided the evening's most satisfying audio as Delilah was arrested for theft, filing false reports, and federal civil rights violations. Her husband watched from behind curtains, probably Googling divorce lawyers and criminal defense attorneys. Within hours, she was making desperate phone calls trying to recruit allies, claiming I was psychologically dangerous. Neighbors forwarded her increasingly unhinged messages, showing panic consuming whatever remained of her sanity. The rough concrete felt different under my fingertips that night, no longer just anchor points, but evidence markers in a federal case that would define the rest of her life. Officer Morrison handed me incident numbers and prosecutor contact information. Simple theft was just the appetizer. Civil rights violations carry federal prison sentences that make state charges look like parking tickets. The warm evening air filled with neighbors finally speaking freely, sharing suppressed stories, and building genuine community. One stolen air conditioner had exposed systematic criminal enterprise masquerading as neighborhood governance. Time to discover how Orange looked on entitled white ladies. While Delilah rotted in county lockup discovering that orange jumpsuits clash with entitled attitudes, Sofia Rodriguez was conducting digital forensics that would make CSI jealous. Our teenage legal prodigy had spent 72 hours straight hunting through HOA records like a bloodhound tracking fresh meat. What she found wasn't just fraud, it was a criminal empire disguised as suburban governance. "Marcus, sit down before you see this," Sophia whispered, spreading documents across my kitchen table like tarot cards predicting someone's doom. The sharp scent of overbrewed coffee mixed with the musty smell of financial evidence as she revealed 3 years of systematic theft. Delilah hadn't just been collecting violation fines. She'd been operating a money laundering scheme that would impress the mob. $127,000 in emergency assessments and violation penalties had disappeared into fake companies owned by her brother-in-law. Only $31,000 had actually reached HOA accounts. Cromwell Property Solutions existed solely on paper. No business license, no employees, and a registered address that turned out to be a strip mall mailbox between a nail salon and a psychic reader. The irony of that location wasn't lost on anyone. George's surveyor contacts had been making calls, and their discoveries turned my stomach. The HOA was secretly facing a $200,000 lawsuit for unpaid management fees, debt Delilah had hidden while collecting emergency legal assessments from residents who thought they were paying legitimate court costs. But Earl's contractor network revealed the real masterpiece of her criminal artistry. Delilah had been systematically targeting corner lot owners across 4 subdivisions, manufacturing fake violations to force distressed sales, then collecting real estate commissions when her company handled the emergency transactions. My lot wasn't randomly chosen. It was specifically targeted for acquisition and resale. The concrete pad that started this war wasn't about building codes. It was about stealing my family's home. The bitter taste of betrayal filled my mouth as I processed the scope of her operation. Every violation notice, every harassment campaign, every late-night property inspection had been calculated moves in a real estate theft scheme affecting hundreds of families. Dr. Valdez's medical documentation had triggered federal disability rights investigators, and what they'd found made my air conditioning theft look like a parking violation. Statistical analysis showed 73% of recent violations had targeted minority homeowners or families with disabled members. Those numbers don't happen by accident. Random enforcement creates random patterns. Systematic discrimination creates mathematical proof of civil rights violations. Officer Morrison's follow-up investigation revealed that Delilah served on 3 other HOA boards, each showing identical patterns: financial irregularities, selective enforcement against vulnerable residents, and mysterious pressure campaigns that coincidentally resulted in property sales through her real estate network. The warm glow of computer screens illuminated evening strategy sessions as our evidence file grew thicker than a phone book. We weren't fighting neighborhood drama. We'd uncovered organized crime with HOA credentials. Sophia's LinkedIn investigation had connected Delilah to property investment firms specializing in distressed residential acquisitions through strategic community partnerships, corporate speak for stealing homes from families who couldn't fight back. But the nuclear weapon in our evidence arsenal was Rita's medical case. Federal disability laws carry mandatory minimum sentences for anyone who endangers disabled residents' prescribed medical equipment. What Delilah called compliance enforcement qualified as criminal endangerment under statutes that could lock her away until her BMW became a classic car. The crisp sound of Rebecca Torres's law office printer filled the air as she prepared federal civil rights complaints that would make Delilah's previous problems look like jaywalking tickets. State Attorney General investigators were already scheduling interviews, and FBI white-collar crime specialists had opened preliminary files. The power dynamic had flipped completely. Armed with financial fraud evidence, discrimination statistics, medical endangerment documentation, and systematic conspiracy proof, I possessed enough legal ammunition to obliterate every aspect of Delilah's existence. But Rebecca's advice echoed in my mind. Sometimes the most powerful victories come from offering mercy to enemies who don't deserve it. The quiet hum of my properly functioning air conditioner reminded me that justice and revenge weren't always the same thing. The community needed healing, not just punishment. Time to decide whether destroying Delilah completely would actually serve justice, or just satisfy my anger. Rebecca Torres walked into my garage the next morning carrying a briefcase that probably cost more than my truck, and an expression that suggested she ate corrupt officials for breakfast. Harvard Law graduate, civil rights specialist, and according to Sophia's debate coach, the kind of attorney who made insurance companies soil themselves. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, surveying our makeshift war room with obvious delight, "I've reviewed your evidence file. This isn't just a lawsuit. It's a federal prosecutor's wet dream wrapped in a bow." She took the case pro bono after watching security footage of Delilah orchestrating grand theft air conditioning. Apparently, watching privileged suburbanites commit felonies on HD video was Rebecca's definition of Christmas morning entertainment. George's son David arrived looking like he'd won the forensic accounting lottery. Former IRS investigator, current financial bloodhound, and volunteer extraordinaire once he'd seen the artistic beauty of Delilah's money laundering operation. 48 hours, David promised, flexing his fingers like a concert pianist. "I'll trace every stolen penny back to her secret accounts and probably find Jimmy Hoffa's retirement fund while I'm at it." The rich aroma of Mrs. Chen's imported coffee transformed my garage into Mission Control headquarters. Her nephew from Channel 7 had convinced his news director that suburban crime boss terrorizes diabetic grandmother would play better than their usual city council coverage. Sophia's organizational genius would have impressed Pentagon strategists. She'd created a digital fortress where neighbors could upload documentation faster than Delilah could manufacture lies. Within 1 week, we'd cataloged 147 discriminatory actions across 4 subdivisions, enough evidence to wallpaper the FBI's white-collar crime division. Here's something I'd learned from watching Rebecca work. Class action lawsuits against HOA boards require proving systematic discrimination affecting multiple residents. But when you document everything and coordinate with neighbors, individual harassment becomes federal conspiracy charges that carry decades in prison. Dr. Valdez connected us with state disability rights investigators who confirmed that targeting disabled residents' medical equipment violated Federal Fair Housing Act protections, carrying penalties that would make Delilah's previous problems look like parking tickets. The satisfying snap of 3-ring binders being organized filled our evening strategy sessions. Tom Bradley channeled his military police background into coordinating a surveillance network that would have impressed the NSA. Every common area, every meeting location, every escape route, all monitored by neighbors who'd transformed from victims into intelligence operatives. We formalized the Meadowbrook Accountability Coalition with bylaws that would survive legal challenges and a defense fund that grew daily as more families discovered they weren't alone in their harassment experiences. 15 initial families became 37 within 2 weeks, each contributing $50 and stories that made my air conditioning theft look like shoplifting. Earl's nephew on the county commission triggered a comprehensive audit of HOA-related permits issued during Delilah's reign of terror. This investigation would probably uncover enough additional fraud to keep prosecutors busy until their retirement parties. The gentle whir of multiple laptops provided background music as volunteers documented evidence with archaeological precision. Rebecca guided our process to ensure everything would survive appellate scrutiny and federal review. No technicalities, no procedural mistakes, no escape routes for criminal defendants. But our most powerful weapon was Rita's medical documentation. Every health impact, every stress-induced complication, every sleepless night worrying about home security, quantified into damages that would make any jury want to throw things at defense attorneys. My temporary window unit rattled constantly in the background like a mechanical reminder of ongoing harm. The doubled energy costs and reduced cooling efficiency got documented daily, transforming every electric bill into evidence of continuing damages. David's financial archaeology had uncovered Delilah's complete criminal empire. 6 phantom companies, 12 fraudulent vendor contracts, and enough money laundering to trigger federal RICO prosecutions. His spreadsheets read like organized crime educational materials. Sophia's media strategy focused on universal themes, protecting vulnerable neighbors, ensuring transparent governance, and preventing housing discrimination. Her press releases could have been written by presidential campaign professionals, except they had the advantage of being completely true. Rebecca outlined our mercy offer: voluntary resignation, full financial restitution, public apology, and mandatory diversity training in exchange for reduced criminal charges. This approach protected the community while demonstrating grace that Delilah absolutely didn't deserve but might accept to avoid federal prison. The nuclear option remained ready. Criminal complaints, civil rights lawsuits, federal housing discrimination charges, state corruption referrals, and enough media coverage to make her the poster child for HOA abuse nationwide. Our timing was surgical precision, media investigation airing during the annual HOA meeting week, with federal charges filed immediately if she rejected our settlement terms. Beyond punishment, we'd planned positive community initiatives, neighborhood watch programs, community gardens, scholarship funds for students pursuing legal and construction careers, and annual block parties celebrating diversity instead of discriminating against it. The warm evening air carried sounds of neighbors laughing together, possibly for the first time since Delilah's coronation as suburban dictator. What began as one man defending his air conditioner had evolved into an entire community reclaiming its soul, time to discover whether Delilah possessed enough intelligence to surrender before complete annihilation. Delilah's response to our overwhelming evidence wasn't surrender, it was sabotage at 2 a.m. My security cameras caught her creeping around my property like a discount ninja, armed with a screwdriver and the kind of desperation that makes people do stupid things in high definition. She spent 20 minutes trying to damage my temporary window AC unit, apparently believing that destroying backup cooling equipment would somehow strengthen her legal position. The automatic floodlights triggered when she got too close, bathing her in Hollywood-quality illumination while the audio system announced, "Security breach detected, police have been notified." Watching her scramble away from my property like a startled raccoon would have been hilarious if it wasn't also criminal vandalism. When confronted the next morning by neighbors who'd witnessed her midnight crime spree, she claimed she was conducting safety inspections for code violations at 2 a.m. with burglary tools while trespassing on private property. Her next brilliant strategy involved hiring her brother-in-law's security consulting company to drive past my house multiple times daily, taking photographs and making Rita feel unsafe in her own home. These intimidation patrols backfired spectacularly when neighbors started photographing the harassment vehicles and documenting license plates, times, and suspicious behavior patterns. The acrid smell of anxiety filled our house as Rita's blood pressure spiked from constant surveillance stress. But Tom Bradley's military experience had taught him that bullies rarely expect their targets to fight back with superior tactics. Within 48 hours, our neighborhood watch network was photographing the photographers, following the followers, and turning Delilah's intimidation campaign into a comprehensive criminal evidence collection operation. George became Delilah's next target for attempted bribery, a conversation he recorded with the precision of someone who'd spent decades documenting property disputes. She offered to waive 2 years of HOA fees if he'd stop helping me and admit his survey measurements were wrong. "Mrs. Cromwell," George replied with the patience of someone explaining basic math to a toddler, "I've been surveying properties since before you learned to lie professionally. My measurements are accurate, my equipment is calibrated, and your bribery attempt is being recorded." The crisp sound of her heels clicking rapidly away from his property suggested she hadn't expected that level of preparation from a harmless old man. But Delilah's masterpiece of desperation was creating an anonymous blog called Meadowbrook Truth Exposed, featuring fabricated criminal records, invented mental health problems, and photographs of my house and family members. The blog claimed I was a dangerous criminal with documented violence issues and substance abuse problems. Every word was pure fiction, but the photographs were real, taken during her midnight stalking expeditions and daytime harassment patrols. Here's something Rebecca had taught us about cyberstalking laws. Publishing fabricated criminal records and personal photographs without consent constitutes criminal harassment in most states, especially when combined with intimidation campaigns and documented threats. Digital stalking carries the same penalties as physical stalking, plus additional charges for identity fraud and defamation. The blog backfired more completely than a meth lab explosion when neighbors recognized Delilah's distinctive writing style and the specific camera angles she'd used during her surveillance operations. Within hours, screenshots were being forwarded to police as evidence of criminal harassment and cyberstalking. Her most disgusting escalation came through weaponizing adult protective services. She filed formal complaints claiming Rita was being neglected and kept in unsafe conditions without proper medical cooling, alleging that I was endangering my mother's health through willful negligence. The investigation triggered by false APS reports could have removed Rita from her own home based on fabricated evidence and malicious lies. When APS investigators arrived, they found extensive medical documentation, professional cooling equipment running perfectly, and a loving family relationship that contradicted every aspect of Delilah's false reports. The investigators became witnesses to her systematic harassment campaign and documented her abuse of government services for personal revenge. The musty smell of accumulated legal documents filled our kitchen as we organized evidence of each escalation. Every sabotage attempt, every bribery offer, every false report created additional criminal charges while strengthening our civil case. Rebecca explained that defendants often destroy themselves through panic-driven escalation when they realize their original crimes have been exposed. Each desperate action provided more evidence, more witnesses, and more serious federal charges. Local media attention intensified after neighbors forwarded the blog posts and security footage to Channel 7's investigative team. The story evolved from neighborhood dispute to systematic criminal harassment investigation with federal implications. Delilah's real estate license came under review after complaints about discriminatory practices and false statements to government agencies. Her broker received copies of all evidence and began distancing the company from her increasingly radioactive professional reputation. The soft keyboard clicks of neighbors documenting each harassment incident created a digital paper trail that would survive any attempt at evidence destruction. Our documentation had become legally bulletproof despite Delilah's desperate sabotage efforts. But her crowning achievement in criminal stupidity was attempting to enter my backyard at night, caught on multiple cameras from different angles with audio recordings of her explaining to someone on the phone about pressure points and compliance acceleration techniques. Officer Morrison arrested her for criminal trespassing and issued restraining orders protecting my entire family from further harassment. The arrest created an official criminal record that would follow her through every subsequent legal proceeding. Every escalation had backfired completely, creating more evidence, more witnesses, and more serious charges. Delilah wasn't just digging her own grave, she was excavating her own mausoleum. Time to see how deep she could go before hitting bedrock. Cornered like a rabid animal with a law degree, Delilah launched her most pathetic offensive yet, recruiting fellow HOA dictators to join her holy war against dangerous insurgents threatening suburban civilization. Her recruitment pitch was pure desperation wrapped in paranoid delusion. She contacted HOA presidents across 3 counties, claiming I was leading a coordinated anti-authority movement that would spread like wildfire unless they took preemptive defensive action to protect legitimate community governance. The beautiful irony tasted sweeter than revenge. Every person she called had been following our story on social media like a Netflix binge series. Instead of joining her imaginary resistance army, they recorded her increasingly unhinged phone calls and forwarded them to police as evidence of conspiracy and criminal solicitation. "This man is destroying everything we've sacrificed to build," Delilah sobbed to Jennifer Walsh from Sunset Meadows HOA, her voice cracking like thin ice under pressure. He's teaching residents they can question our authority. If we don't eliminate this threat, chaos will consume every neighborhood in America." Jennifer's response was chef's kiss perfection. "Lady, I watched you steal medical equipment from a diabetic grandmother on the evening news. I'm hanging up and calling the FBI." The sharp crack of disconnected phone calls became Delilah's new theme song as potential allies transformed into additional prosecution witnesses. But the real smoking gun emerged from David's forensic accounting wizardry. While we'd been documenting her harassment campaign, she'd been frantically liquidating HOA accounts and transferring funds to offshore investments. Bank security cameras had captured her at multiple branches, desperately trying to move money and delete digital transaction records. David's explanation made my blood boil. Electronic banking systems create permanent audit trails that survive any destruction attempt. It's like trying to unring a bell or unsend an embarrassing text. Banks preserve everything by federal law, and attempting to destroy digital evidence just adds obstruction charges to your felony collection. Her search for character witnesses became a masterclass in social isolation. She needed community members willing to testify about her dedicated service and my threatening behavior, but couldn't find anyone willing to commit perjury for a woman who'd terrorized their neighbors for years. Every potential witness either refused involvement or volunteered additional evidence against her. Mrs. Peterson cheerfully offered to testify about the time Delilah cited her elderly poodle for aggressive barking after it whimpered during a thunderstorm. The acrid smell of panic sweat must have followed her everywhere as Channel 7's investigation expanded into a three-part exposé on suburban corruption that attracted State Attorney General attention. Our story had become required viewing for anyone interested in government accountability and community justice. Political pressure mounted like steam in a pressure cooker as county commissioners faced hostile questions during public meetings about their oversight of HOA terrorism. Emergency hearings were scheduled for community governance reform, political speak for "we're going to regulate these neighborhood Napoleons before they trigger federal intervention." Delilah's final act of professional suicide involved filing false complaints claiming my HVAC work violated safety standards and endangered lives. The state licensing board investigated with the thoroughness of IRS auditors and found my work exemplary, adding malicious false reporting to her expanding criminal resume. The investigation also revealed she'd been filing similar fabricated reports against contractors who'd refused to pay kickbacks for HOA referrals, commercial extortion that triggered federal racketeering charges carrying decades in prison. Throughout her escalating insanity, I maintained dignity and let her commit legal suicide while building community support. Rebecca's wisdom guided every decision. Never interrupt enemies when they're destroying themselves with documented stupidity. The heavy evening air vibrated with helicopter rotors as media attention reached presidential campaign levels. Our neighborhood dispute had evolved into a statewide symbol of grassroots resistance against institutional abuse. Her isolation became total and self-inflicted. Board members publicly condemned her actions. Her husband filed for separation, citing irreconcilable criminal differences. Her real estate company terminated her employment to avoid association with federal charges. But here's the twist that made everything perfect. While Delilah spiraled into criminal desperation, our evidence preservation had created an impenetrable legal fortress. Every recording, every document, every witness statement had been professionally preserved and legally authenticated despite her destruction attempts. Federal subpoenas arrived like Christmas morning as investigators expanded into her entire criminal network. State and federal prosecutors were competing to handle the case because successful prosecution would establish precedents protecting vulnerable residents nationwide. The Department of Justice confirmed they were considering our case as a model for federal HOA reform legislation. Delilah's harassment campaign had accidentally created legal frameworks that would shield disabled and minority homeowners across America. The crisp sound of justice approaching filled the air as we prepared for the annual HOA meeting. Every resident planned to attend, media coverage was confirmed, county officials would witness the proceedings, and federal investigators had requested video documentation. The calm before the storm felt electric with anticipation. We possessed overwhelming evidence, federal support, media backing, and community solidarity. Delilah had criminal charges, social isolation, and rapidly diminishing sanity. Tomorrow would determine whether she'd face accountability with whatever dignity remained, or complete her transformation into a cautionary tale about the price of suburban tyranny. The Meadowbrook Community Center hadn't seen this much excitement since the Great Bake Sale riot of 2019. What normally attracted 12 sleepy residents had transformed into a media circus featuring 127 angry homeowners, 3 news crews, county officials, and enough security cameras to film a Marvel movie. Rebecca and I had prepared professional presentation boards displaying the timeline of harassment, financial evidence, and medical documentation with the precision of a war crimes tribunal. No emotional outbursts, no personal attacks, just facts so overwhelming they could crush diamond. The sharp scent of fresh coffee mixed with nervous sweat as residents filled every seat and lined the walls like witnesses to a public execution. This wasn't just an HOA meeting anymore. It was democracy in action with federal implications. Delilah arrived fashionably late with a lawyer who looked expensive enough to own his own yacht, and 2 men who screamed private security from their cheap suits and permanent scowls. Her artificial confidence fooled exactly no one, but she'd clearly been coached to project authority while her world crumbled around her. Under HOA bylaws, annual meetings required financial reports, which meant Delilah had to present the book she'd been cooking for 3 years. When she attempted to skip the financial presentation entirely, I calmly requested it per established procedures, forcing the conversation she'd been avoiding. "Before we discuss routine business," she announced with the authority of someone addressing peasants, "I want to address malicious rumors spread by disgruntled residents who don't understand proper community governance." That's when David stepped to the microphone carrying spreadsheets that spelled her doom in 12-point font. "Ladies and gentlemen, your HOA has collected $127,000 in violation fines and special assessments over 3 years. Your official accounts show $31,000. I'd like Mrs. Cromwell to explain where the missing $96,000 went." The silence that followed could have been bottled and sold as awkwardness concentrate. David's visual presentation was prosecutorial perfection. Bank records, fraudulent vendor payments, and unauthorized personal expenses displayed with the clarity of a PowerPoint death sentence. The numbers didn't lie, even when Delilah's mouth did. "These accusations are racist attacks designed to undermine legitimate authority," she declared, playing her last desperate card while the room erupted in unified disgust. That's when the beautiful thing happened. Residents of every background stood up to share violation stories that proved systematic discrimination beyond any reasonable doubt. Mrs. Chen's garden gnomes, the Rodriguez family's swing set, Tom Bradley's classic car, each targeted for manufactured violations that followed identical patterns of harassment. Rita rose slowly from her chair, her dignity radiating like sunlight as she approached the microphone. The room fell silent as she spoke about medical necessity, stolen cooling equipment, and the cruelty of endangering disabled residents for real estate profit. "My air conditioner isn't a luxury," Rita said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute truth. "It's prescribed medical equipment that keeps me alive. Taking it wasn't enforcement, it was attempted murder disguised as community service." The metallic taste of justice filled the air as Rebecca calmly explained that stealing medically necessary equipment from disabled residents violated 5 separate federal laws, each carrying mandatory prison sentences and financial penalties that would make Delilah's theft look like pocket change. Officer Morrison's presence in full uniform lent official gravity to the criminal complaints. Her attendance signaled that this wasn't just civil dispute anymore. Federal prosecutors were watching every word for criminal trial preparation. One by one, neighbors shared how Delilah's selective enforcement had affected their families. The pattern was undeniable. Cross the queen, get targeted, question her authority, face manufactured violations, refuse her demands, watch your property become a harassment battleground. Faced with overwhelming evidence and community opposition, Delilah's mask finally disintegrated completely. "I built this neighborhood. I protected your property values. These people don't appreciate everything I've sacrificed for their ungrateful families." Her racist rant got recorded by multiple devices as she screamed about residents knowing their place and respecting legitimate authority. Every word became additional evidence for federal hate crime prosecutors. The remaining HOA board members, attending via video to distance themselves from the disaster, formally requested Delilah's immediate resignation and surrender of all community property, accounts, and records. When she refused to resign, I stood and calmly announced that criminal complaints had been filed with county prosecutors, federal civil rights violations reported to the Department of Justice, and class action civil suits prepared for 67 affected families. The crisp sound of folding chairs creaking under the weight of justice filled the air as residents voted 118-3 to remove Delilah from all positions and demand full restitution. Even her few remaining supporters abandoned ship after watching the financial evidence presentation. "This is a witch hunt," she screamed, storming toward the exit while cameras captured her meltdown for posterity. "You'll regret this when your property values collapse without proper leadership." Officer Morrison intercepted her at the door with criminal summons for theft, fraud, harassment, and federal civil rights violations. The timing was perfect, maximum educational impact for every witness present. As handcuffs clicked shut around Delilah's wrists, residents immediately began planning positive changes. Transparent financial management, fair enforcement policies, community improvement projects, and protection systems for vulnerable neighbors. The warm buzz of productive conversation replaced years of fearful silence as people finally felt safe to speak openly about community needs and shared solutions. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, accepting the microphone for one final statement, "this was never about personal revenge. This was about protecting our neighbors, ensuring fair treatment, and proving that community accountability is stronger than individual tyranny." The thunderous applause that followed felt like democracy being reborn in a suburban community center, one honest vote at a time. 48 hours after Delilah's public meltdown, my AC unit was professionally reinstalled with full HOA approval and a formal written apology that Rebecca framed for her office wall. The familiar electrical hum that filled our house felt like freedom itself. Rita's blood sugar stabilized, her sleep improved, and for the first time in months, our family felt genuinely safe in our own home. Justice moved swiftly once federal prosecutors reviewed our evidence mountain. Delilah pleaded guilty to theft, fraud, harassment, civil rights violations, and racketeering charges rather than face a trial that would have been live-streamed like the legal equivalent of a public execution. 18 months in federal prison, 5 years probation, $847,000 in restitution payments, and a lifetime ban from any HOA leadership position anywhere in America. The forensic audit recovered every stolen penny plus punitive damages that made our legal victory financially sweet. David's investigation had traced funds through 6 fake companies and 12 fraudulent accounts, creating a money trail so obvious that prosecutors used it for training seminars on how not to launder money like an amateur. Every affected family received full compensation, and the HOA established emergency reserves to prevent future abuse. The restitution payments funded community improvements that actually served residents instead of enriching corrupt officials. But the real victory was federal precedent. The Department of Justice used our case to establish new protections for disabled residents facing discriminatory enforcement, creating legal frameworks that would shield vulnerable homeowners nationwide. Rebecca's civil rights lawsuit became required reading in law schools studying housing discrimination and community accountability. Meadowbrook transformed from a neighborhood ruled by fear into a model of transparent, accountable governance. Our new bylaws required financial transparency, independent audits, elected oversight committees, and specific protections for elderly, disabled, and minority residents. The Meadowbrook model spread to other communities seeking reform. The sweet scent of Rita's blooming roses filled the evening air as we established the Rita Blackwood Health and Housing Scholarship, funded by recovered stolen money and community donations. The program supports students pursuing careers in HVAC, disability advocacy, community law, and other fields that protect vulnerable residents from systematic abuse. Delilah's professional consequences extended far beyond criminal penalties. Her real estate license was permanently revoked. Her fraudulent companies faced state investigation affecting 3 other counties, and her case became a cautionary tale in real estate ethics courses nationwide. Personal healing came gradually, but genuinely. Rita became a powerful advocate for elderly and disabled residents, speaking at county meetings about protective policies and testifying for state legislation requiring HOA accountability measures. Her courage inspired other vulnerable residents to speak up about their own experiences. The ripple effects spread beyond our subdivision. 6 other communities contacted us for guidance fighting similar corruption, and the Meadowbrook Accountability Coalition became a resource center for residents facing HOA abuse nationwide. Our documentation templates, legal strategies, and community organizing methods became freely available tools for grassroots democracy. Channel 7's three-part investigation won a state journalism award and triggered comprehensive HOA reform legislation requiring financial transparency, anti-discrimination protections, and resident rights enforcement. The story became mandatory viewing in real estate licensing courses and community management certification programs. Our first annual Good Neighbor Day celebration filled the air with barbecue smoke, children's laughter, and the steady hum of properly functioning air conditioning units protecting every family's health and comfort. The community garden planted where Delilah's fake violation signs once spread, fear and division, became a symbol of neighbors working together for mutual benefit. George established a free property survey service for homeowners facing HOA boundary disputes, preventing future manipulation schemes. Sophia received college scholarships for her research contributions and plans to study civil rights law, interning with Rebecca during her senior year. Tom Bradley's security camera network evolved into a neighborhood watch program that actually builds community instead of targeting residents. Mrs. Chen's informal coffee meetings became formal monthly gatherings where neighbors share resources, solve problems, and celebrate successes together. The crisp sound of productive conversation replaced years of fearful whispers as residents discovered the power of working together instead of suffering separately. Democracy isn't just about voting, it's about neighbors helping neighbors and holding leaders accountable for their actions. Here's what I learned from fighting suburban tyranny. Bullies in small positions often commit big crimes, but documentation beats intimidation every time. Find your allies, preserve your evidence, and never let anyone convince you that fighting corruption makes you the troublemaker. Sometimes the most important battles happen in your own backyard, and sometimes ordinary people can create extraordinary change when they refuse to accept injustice as normal. If you've survived an HOA nightmare, drop your story in the comments. Your experience might help someone else fighting similar battles. Subscribe and hit that notification bell because we're investigating community corruption nationwide, and your story might be next. Remember, the most powerful weapon against abuse of authority is an informed, organized, and determined community that refuses to stay silent. Change starts with one person standing up, but it succeeds when neighbors stand together.